Yeah, absolutely. I say no to people all the time, constantly. Yeah. Pardon me?
Would you like to come to the genre of like phones that they're looking for?
So basically what happens, like when I say no to somebody, it's because I don't feel like I can give them what they're looking for. I'm always willing to take on a challenge, especially if it's something that I've never done before. I'm always upfront and honest with my clients and say I've never done anything like that. I've done things similar where I feel like my skill set will allow me to succeed in this job. And so yes, I'll do that. I've had a lot of wedding clients in particular where I'll meet up with them and they'll tell me about their vision for their day and kind of what they're looking for. And I know that it's nothing like what I'm going to be able to do for them. So I straight up say I think your guys' wedding day sounds fantastic and I'm really excited for you, but I don't feel like I'm the right photographer for you. So here's 5 other people that I know who are better suited to your needs and your wants, and they'll be better able to help you for your day. So yeah, I'm always willing to take on a challenge, but if I don't feel obviously I need to do it for the money because I have a mortgage to pay and car payments and everything else. But at the end of the day, if I'm taking on a job that I know that I can't succeed in, I'm not doing anybody a favor. So I'll always turn something down if it's not suited for me or my style.
Because then your client is unhappy.
Exactly.
They start bad mouthing you on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I do. Yes. Yes. A lot of my tattoos are very nerdy, incredibly nerdy. Actually, I'm talking about how it impacts my job too. Most of them, it means something to me. So for example, I have a very large portrait of Angela Lansbury tattooed on me. I don't know if anybody in here knows who that is, but if you've seen Murder, She Wrote, that is the lovely old woman in that show. So it's something, yeah, and that's exactly the reaction I want, is because it makes me laugh. And so it makes me happy and I don't care what anybody else thinks. So it's more so tattoos that are special to me in that they make me feel a certain way. So maybe it's a memory, maybe it's just because it's silly and it makes me. I have a tattoo of Bigfoot because, again, I think it's hilarious. So just cuts. But one thing, job-wise, is if you guys have taken a look at my site, I make sure that those pictures show me in a tank top, so you can see all of my tattoos, and I've actually gotten more since those pictures, so that my clients have the opportunity to look. And I always, every single time, especially a wedding client, will write an inquiry, I always direct them to that page as well, because it's not for everybody. And there's going to be a grandma or an aunt or a mom or somebody who, women, or a grandpa or an uncle or whoever, who doesn't agree with the way that I look. And I made the decision a long time ago that if I was ever in a position where having the word read and write tattooed on my hand or having Bigfoot on my ankle or whatever was a place where that wasn't okay, then I wasn't in the right spot. But you know what I mean? Again, we were talking about backup plans. What about my backup plan? Does it matter? It might one day, but that's something that I have to deal with. And I'm okay with that. I knew that going into this, before I got my hand tattooed, that it might impact my job one day. And then I'm probably just, for me personally, I'm not in the right spot. And that's not the right decision for everyone, but definitely something to keep in mind. A lot of people will look at it and think that maybe I'm not professional. And it's not the case. I pride myself on I try to be as professional as I can and not, so everybody's going to have an opinion of the way you look, and that may impact your jobs, especially if you're self-employed. But for me, I feel more like myself now that I'm tattooed. I feel like this is how I'm supposed to look. So for me, it was the right decision, but it won't be for everyone. The Harry Potter tattoo? What about it? Oh yeah, it's from Harry Potter. So the platform 9 3/4. Again, super nerdy. Most of my tattoos are.
My niece has the same one.
Yeah.
And she's a tattoo artist.
Okay, yeah.
So she's got a lot of actually facial tattoos on her face. But she has the
6
Yeah.
How did it go if I hit your
It didn't actually hurt that much. But I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I also say that my hand didn't hurt. So
That's,
where's your hand? That's like,
My feet.
I want to get a tattoo. Just
my mom was on her butt, and
Yep.
that was her first one, and she said it was her first fast, and everyone said it would.
Yeah.
But like, for this one, isn't there like both
Mhm.
things?
Yeah. Mine, I don't know, mine didn't swell up or anything, so, but that's just,
My
like, I,
mom
like,
got
I
one
just
on
had
her
my
foot.
forearm tattooed, it was awful. But I've had this one done, and it was fine. They're both my arms, but one of them hurt way more than the other, so.
What are your thoughts on global
Alright. Any other questions?
warming? What are your thoughts on global warming?
let's go to the fascinating stuff.
Let's get controversial.
So-
What are your thoughts on global?
The next part of this is a little dry, and I apologize, so just sort of bear with me. We're gonna talk about lenses. It's really important to learn about what lenses do and how you can utilize them in your photography, and it's a little bit about numbers, and I'm sorry about being a little bit boring. Yes,
Do you like Nikon cameras better than Canon?
I personally do. And this is the last class. The reason why I chose Nikon, this is so silly, is because when I started, that's what National Geographic was shooting with. That's how I chose one over the other. At the end of the day, honestly, they're pretty much the same. I personally prefer the skin tones from a Nikon camera versus a Canon. I had a second shooter who was working with me shooting Canon, and I hate the way that the skin tones look. But some people feel the exact same way about Nikon. So it all comes down to personal preference, absolutely. Especially between Nikon and Canon, because they're so similar. And then a big thing is skin tones. So a lot of photographers, just their editing style will better complement Canon skin tones versus Nikon. Yeah. Yes. So lenses. So before we even dive into kind of what lenses mean and what they all do, it's important to understand the difference between a crop sensor lens and a crop sensor camera versus a full frame lens and a full frame camera. So is anybody familiar with those two things at all? Anyone? No? Okay. So back when people were still shooting with film and only film, and that was kind of all that existed, the standard camera was like a 35 millimeter camera. And that's now what they call a full frame camera. Now with digital, we also have crop sensors. So a standard frame was say 35 millimeters. A crop frame sensor just narrows your focal view. So full frame and then crop is about 2/3 of your focal view from one to the next. So there are lenses that work just for crop sensors and the lenses that work just for full frame. And yes, you can put one lens on the other and back and forth, but they're just not made for it, so I wouldn't recommend it. If you put a crop sensor lens on a full frame camera, you get a really heavy vignette around the outsides of it. So they're not meant to be interchangeable. So if you're shooting with a crop sensor camera, you need to ensure that you're buying crop sensor lenses, and same thing with full frame. They need to be full frame lenses, or they should be anyway. So when you're looking at them online and kind of like reading specs and stuff, the crop sensor lenses are typically identified by a DX, and the full frame are identified by an FX. So it's usually, if you can see them online and you see something that has a DX next to it or an FX next to it, that's how you tell the difference between what they're for, or what type of camera body they're for. Another big thing that you'll notice kind of between one or the other is that the crop sensor camera and the crop sensor lenses are always going to be less expensive by quite a bit, versus the full frame lenses and the full frame cameras will always be more expensive than the other one. So once you get into lenses, there's a lot of different things that you can do, and this is a very small assortment versus kind of what's out there. A lot of the times if you'll buy a crop sensor camera at the camera store, they come with a lens on them, and it's called a kit lens. So you see sort of like a photography package, and it comes with a lens. That lens on the camera is typically called a kit lens. Those lenses are usually a zoom lens from like an 18 to 55, and you have one. So has anybody played around with the camera that's back here? So you probably shot with this lens. It's called a kit lens, but that's just because it comes as a kit as part of the camera. That's why it's called a kit lens.
So because this one goes 18 to 70. So 18, if you're seeing a bigger view, right?
Yeah, 18 is more like wide angle.
And And 70 is
zoomed in.
It's all those numbers.
So that's a kit lens just because it came as a kit with a counter body. It's also a zoom lens, like a standard zoom, because it has that 18 to 70 zoom. So 18, kind of the smaller the number, the more wide angle the focal view is. The higher the number, the narrower the focal view is. So once you get up into the 200s, 300s, 500s, all that, you're looking at like telephoto zoom lenses. So people who are using them for like some sports photographers, some wildlife photographers, they're all using those longer lenses at those higher focal length numbers, so like a 500 millimeter lens, which allows you to zoom right in. The wide angle ones are more like the 8 millimeter, the 10 millimeter, the 12 millimeter. Those are wide angle lenses. So a standard zoom lens typically goes from like 18, which is kind of wide angle, to 55, or 28 to 70, which is similar to the one that we have here. So at 70, you're starting to zoom in. At the 50 millimeter focal length, so we've also got a nifty 50 lens, which is just like, usually they're like little pancake lenses like this guy on this camera. The 50 millimeter lens is often called the nifty 50, and it's because its focal length is quite similar to how you're seeing. So if I hold my camera up and I'm looking through a 50 millimeter lens, there isn't any like zoom or widening effect. It's quite literally almost exactly as I'm seeing. That's why it's typically called the nifty 50. So it's a really great versatile lens, but it is sort of standard as you're seeing. Once we get into the standard zooms or wide angles, we get kind of wider or narrow. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So from standard zoom, we then go up to telephoto. So that's where, like I said, you're getting the sports photographers, the wildlife photographers, and it's more zoomed in then when you get those longer lenses like this. On the other end of it is wide angle lenses. So if you guys ever seen like the fisheye type lenses or photo sticking with a fisheye lens, that's a wide angle lens or like a specialty wide angle lens. So that's what those do. And then we also have options of prime lenses. So these are zoom lenses, meaning that they start at one focal length and you can zoom in and out on them. Prime lenses, you can't zoom. So they have a fixed focal length on them. So this is a prime 85 millimeter. So it has a bit of a zoom on, or like it looks like it's zoomed in a little bit, but I can't actually change my zoom. If I want to get closer or further away from a subject, I have to use my feet and walk closer or further away from the object. Same with like a prime 50 millimeter. Yes? No, go ahead.
For like, I know what you're shooting, what type of lens do you prefer to use?
It does depend actually very much like what I'm shooting, and that's kind of why I have the collection that I do, is because I shoot such a variety of things that everyone sort of has its own specific use and need. So for me, like when I'm shooting a wedding ceremony, that's like literally the only time I use this lens, is when I say this, during a wedding ceremony. Some photographers will shoot portraits with like this water zoom. I personally find it quite heavy, so I don't. If I'm shooting pet photography, I typically go more wide angle. And this is a nice because it's got that wide angle but a little bit of a zoom, so it's great for families and stuff like that too. If I'm photographing portraits, I go with my 85 or my 50. If I'm just doing creative, I go with this guy, which is a tilt shift. This is a specialty lens. The tilt shift's really cool because it blurs out either the sides of the image or the top and the bottom, just depending on if I'm doing a landscape photo or a portrait photo. And it's all manual focus, so I just do everything by hand, and it's a specialty lens because it doesn't really have a specific purpose outside of looking fun. So I use this sometimes for different things. So it just depends, what I'm shooting. Do you have a question back there? No? So yeah, that's kind of, depending on what you're sort of doing, it will change, yes.
I can't remember what it was, they said that you put one lens on top of like a full image. They're full lens.
Full frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you get like that kind of heavy faded out.
Yes.
So like, could you use that to create that effect?
You could. Aesthetically, it's a bit of a dated, like having that heavy vignette. It's like a dated look. Like that was very.
Do that in weddings.
Yeah, it was very, very popular like in the 80s, and sometimes they